Hey guys, Josh from the Ancient History Guy here. Hello and welcome to all. I hope you're doing fantastic. Anyways, I'm going to be talking about the Roman government today, specifically an office of the Roman Senate called the Tribunes. But we are also going to ask how one man using a metaphor of a fat man actually saved the Roman Republic from collapsing in on itself. So without further ado, let's get into it. So ancient Rome, specifically early ancient Rome, was a little bit weird. You see, for a short time, the city was actually ruled by kings, although the system was a bit, well, as mentioned, weird. Rather than direct inheritance, the kingship was instead won via election. This election was carried out by a senate, who would propose a certain individual for kingship, and if the senate agreed this person had the best interest of the people of the city at heart, they would then grant him the kingship. Only problem with this system was that it was a prime target for corruption and political meddling, which the rich and powerful Etruscans to the north of the city would frequently use to their advantage, often bribing pro-Etruscans or just straight up actual Etruscans into the kingship role. Sufficient to say, the Roman Senate actually held a large degree of power, so when the Romans expelled their last king, naturally power of the entire city landed in the hands of the Senate, the last remaining governing body of the kingdom. Now this all went swimmingly for a number of years until once again it became apparent just how corruptible the Roman Senate actually was. You see, being in a position of power meant that there was beginning to be a very clear divide between the people ruling the city and the people actually living in the city, known to the Romans as patricians and plebeians respectively. As with most systems, the richer patricians, who were directly involved in politics, got richer, whilst the plebeians got poorer and less well cared for by the state. This eventually resulted in basically a mass city strike, with all the plebeians descending on one of the sacred hills of Rome. Needless to say, this caused a bit of panic in the Senate, as the plebeians made up a majority of the population and could easily storm the Senate buildings and remove them from power, something that the plebeian leaders had actually threatened to do. In a bit of a worry, the Senate decided to send out a popular consul to the hill in order to negotiate with the mob. This consul was warmly received by the mob, who agreed to listen to what he had to say. The consul explained that a fat man needed his legs in order to survive. He explained that the plebs were the legs whilst the state was the fat man. Therefore, they all needed to work together in order for the city to survive. Bizarrely, this story seems to have worked, and the plebs agreed to disband if the consul could guarantee that they would have representatives in the Senate from their own class. And so, the office of Tribune of the Plebs was formed. Now, the point of this office was to make sure that no laws could be passed that directly affected the plebs in a harmful way. This meant that the office had special veto powers, where those holding the office could simply deny the proposed laws going into effect. However, not everyone was in the tribune's power. For one, the office of dictator could push through laws without the approval of tribunes. This makes sense, as usually a dictator was elected during times of great peril, where one man had to make decisions quickly, and so any delaying of this process would just cause more trouble than it was worth. This, of course, all went to plan when the tribunes did what was best for the people, but the thing is, people are, well, people, and can easily be corrupted. As a result, the office sort of unintentionally fell back into the hands of the patricians, who after the Punic Wars with Carthage began to push through laws of their own. This became apparent to a certain Tiberius Gracchus. Now, Tiberius was a member of a very distinguished family. However, after returning from a war in Hispania, he began to notice how badly his soldiers under his command were being treated when they returned home, namely confiscating of their lands and the evicting of their families whilst they were fighting for Rome. The rich would then buy these lands and made loads of money in the process. Having proved himself to his soldiers on the front lines, many began to hail him as their hero and representative in the elite. Tiberius, perhaps honour-bound, whilst also being sympathetic to the plight of his former men, began to look for a solution to this problem. He noticed that the only way to save the plebs from the power-hungry / exploitive patricians was to become a tribune himself, blocking the willpower of the rich patricians whilst also paralysing their ability to continue making money until he got the land back to his soldiers. Tiberius succeeded in his bid for the office and quickly began to carry out his plan to paralyse the patricians. Using the tribune's veto power, Tiberius was able to ground the entirety of the Roman state to a standstill, forcing the Senate to give back land to the soldiers' families. This worked for a time until the Senate caught on to Tiberius' scheme and put their own man in the tribune seat, eventually resulting in the tribunes vetoing Tiberius' own veto. This led to Tiberius having to run for the office again, something which was generally thought of as being illegal. However, having basically paralysed their finances, the patricians were not too happy with Tiberius and his political supporters, resulting in a mass riot between armed supporters of the patricians and the plebeians. Unable to escape the riot, Tiberius was surrounded by patrician gangsters and beaten to death. This use of tribunal powers would continue to be misused over the next centuries. Various patricians would disavow their patrician heritage in order to secure the tribune office. This was most obvious during the political turmoil between the supporters of Caesar and the supporters of the Senate, where the powers of the tribunes were highly sought after. Caesar, upon coming to power, noticeably had several tribunes impeached as they were working against him. Caesar then basically imposed tribune power upon himself, ensuring that no one else could block his political reforms. So what do I think of the tribune office? Personally, I think that it was an office that was meant to do good, but unfortunately was just way too easy to manipulate. This was clearly exemplified by Tiberius Gracchus, who, although attempting to do good, was ultimately steering the office in order to achieve his own personal goals. Once he did it, others knew that it could be done, and so they began to imitate him. You could also view the tribune as sort of a bread thrown to the masses, something the ones in power did to keep those socially below them in check, a sort of, look what we are doing for you, see, you have a voice in our government. All while the people with money and power, well, kept on having money and power. But those are just my thoughts. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you for watching and listening to our videos. Be sure to like, comment and subscribe if you've enjoyed. All sources are listed and linked in the description below. I've been the Ancient History Guy, and as always, I'll be seeing you later.